Good to see 14 people on the live. Drop a shalom if you haven't already. A hello. Where you from? Where you at currently tonight? How was your week? But until then, let's pull up Schumacher. Again, he's jumping over to the New Testament and making the bold claim that that Yeshua and the disciples are now declaring all foods clean. So let's check it out.
The third reason why the dietary laws don't apply to Christians is because in the New Testament, Jesus and the apostles reveal to us that these things have changed. If dietary laws were not established as changeable in Genesis and based on the unfolding of God's redemptive plan, as opposed to God's unchangeable character, it would be harder to understand the New Testament changing them. But these facts already established fit hand in glove with the clear teaching of the New Testament. Firstly, Jesus himself has declared to be clean what was unclean. This happens during his ministry, and then in his conversation with Peter in Acts 10. In Mark 7:18 through 19, we read, "And he said to them, 'Are you so lacking in understanding also? Do you not understand that whatever goes into the man from outside cannot defile him, because it does not go into his heart, but into his stomach, and is eliminated? Thus he declared all foods clean.'"
All right, guys, I'm going to keep this on the screen because it's important to understand that if you are new to Torah, just started keeping Torah, you're going to get this a lot. You're going to get Mark 7, and especially verse 19 in the parentheses where it says, "Thus he, Yeshua, declared all foods clean." You might think, okay, all right, Torah movement is totally lost, and I'm going to go back to eating pork and ham and whatever. But we have some pretty good information for you. While I'm looking at the notes, did you have any thoughts? Because I can keep going. I just wanted to give you a chance to speak.
He mentions Acts 10 and doesn't even get into it, as far as I can tell. But yeah, it's always the. I'm surprised he didn't throw in Romans 14 and 1 Timothy 4, and because these are all the same. It's the same four things every single time, and I'm sure you've got videos on it. I've got videos on it. It's easily refutable, but they just keep going back to it over and over and over again. Mark 7's literally talking about pooping. That's it. Just pooping. And they take... You're muted.
It's talking about hand washing as well, the tradition of hand washing.
Yes. Yeah.
Before we get into it, though, I like Mimi's argument because I've heard this and I thought, hey, that's a good argument. Mimi is a good friend of mine. It's good to see you on here. She said, all foods are clean. Unclean animals aren't food. And that's key. So, yeah, whatever thing is considered food is clean, like goats, beef. But what, a Christian says, yeah, well, pork is food. That's where they go wrong. It's according to scripture, it's not even identified as food. It's just an animal that you're consuming. Like, I would use an example like today's society. If I ask somebody, would you like to have some fresh horse? I just cooked up some horse. Unless you're in Italy or some unique country, most modern societies would be like, that's not food. Or I say, hey, would you like to eat some cat tonight or some dog? They'd say, that's not food. Okay, so they understand that just because something has like meat on a bone, it doesn't make it food, even within our culture alone. So why not apply that same type of thinking when asking yourself, what did they consider food in the first century and prior to within the Hebraic faith? Okay, if you go in time travel to days of Noah, Moses, Yeshua's day, and you say, hey, let's go eat an octopus, they'll say, that's not food. Like they didn't even consider it food. So
quick nerd fact, and then Bible fact. The nerd fact is that the FDA was actually, I don't know that it was entirely instituted because of it, but a huge majority of like the beginning of the FDA was actually because they were putting horse meat in with like your beef and stuff like that. And so they needed to regulate it because they were selling horse meat as beef or something else. And it was horse meat, you know, and they're
Yeah.
like, this is not okay. We need to regulate this.
Yeah.
So in the beginning, at least, FDA was pretty cool.
Hey, I've heard of some places in New York, they were catching the cats on the street and, calling it chicken. They were selling chicken and rice, but, obviously the restaurant got shut down. So again,
And that's where
society
all the rumors
today, even in society today, that as corrupt as we are as a society today, we even understand that not all animals are food. So why not ask the Almighty, what does he consider food? Because he's the one who created all things. He's the one who decided what gets a hoof, what's a single hoof, what's a divided hoof, who chews the cud, who's a predator, who's a bird, who's a fish. And he declares it from the beginning, what's food and not food. So why not ask him and not just, well, my culture and my society, which changes all the time, by the way.
So in Mark 7, which again, the parallels Matthew 15, in order to understand it, you have to understand what netilat yadayim is, because that's what the context is. That's the tradition that is being brought to Yeshua. That's what they're initially accusing him of. Why do you and your disciples not wash your hands before you eat bread? So that takes you right back. And what is his response? First of all, his response is, why do you break God's commands because of your traditions? So that sets the standard or the context of what the entire passage is talking about. And it's talking about ritually cleansing your hands.
Yeah.
You can literally, we were talking about this. You can literally go on Amazon right now. And here's the thing. I'm not opposed to any traditions that anybody has. I don't care if it's a Christian tradition, Jewish tradition, whatever, as long as it doesn't,
contradict scripture or try to override
scripture, or if you're not enforcing it as something that has to be done. You know what I mean? There's a lot of traditions. We've talked about this. I think I'd mentioned a couple things the last time. Like there's traditions that I have that, I wouldn't superimpose on anybody else, but it's just traditions that we have in our household. It's just fun things or, spiritual things as far as like, we blow the shofar on Shabbat, I say the Kaddish, the blessings on Sabbath, I do light the candles, but I don't say that other people have to do these things, and I don't do the hand washing, but that's because, let's be honest, like most of society actually does wash their hands anyways. So it's not like I don't have to make it a ritual because I'm, ADHD, man, I'm always washing my hands anyway, especially when I'm preparing food.
One thing I like to tell people that run to Mark 7 and say that Yeshua declared all foods clean. One way that I prove to them that this whole entire incident is not about Yeshua and the Pharisees arguing about whether or not you can eat pork. It is nothing to do with Yeshua telling his disciples they can eat unclean meats. It has nothing to do with it. How do I know? Well, you take them to Mark 7, verses 1 through 3, and I'll read it to you right now. It says, "Now when the Pharisees gathered to him with some of the scribes who had come from Jerusalem, they saw that some of Yeshua's disciples ate with hands that were defiled, that is, unwashed. For the Pharisees and all the Jews do not eat unless they wash their hands properly, holding to the tradition of the elders." That is key. If you can explain to them that this is not Yeshua changing Yah's law, this is not Yeshua changing the commandments of Yah or saying that we can now eat pork. I declare pork clean. No, the entire thing tells you right there, verse 1 through 3, they didn't wash their hands according to tradition. And now Yeshua is being accused of breaking tradition, but they held that tradition up as the law. Okay? And so Yeshua later on in that chapter says, why do you break the commandments of Yah, Torah, by keeping the tradition? That's what this is about. It's about traditions, hand washing. And you might say, what tradition are you talking about? The tradition within Judaism in the first century is called Netalat Yadayim.
Yep.
It includes hand washing with special vessels, a special bowl, okay, a cup or a jug, but it has to be done a special way. You pour the water over your right hand and then your left hand. So it's even done according to a certain method of which hand goes first, the right hand, then the left. Water must flow from the wrist downward. The amount of water mattered. Hands then were held upward to avoid impurity running back down. And then they recite a blessing. Blessed are you who commanded us concerning the washing of hands. Now, you might ask, hold up. You just said it right there. They were commanded in Torah to wash their hands. Historically, in Exodus chapter 30, the priests who worked in the temple were told to wash their hands before handling food inside the temple, like the bread. Now, as time went on, the Jews pushed this commandment to everyone. Again, Exodus 30 is for priests, hand washing in the temple when handling food in the temple. The Jews decided to push it to every Jewish table, every single person, not just the priests in the temple. It says, quote, every Jewish table is like a mini temple altar. So now the Jews created this tradition that every table that a Jew sits at is like a miniature temple altar, and thus you must always do the ritual hand washing that the priests did in the temple of Exodus 30. So now you can see that it's not a commandment of Yah for every believer to go through this ritual hand washing before eating. It's not a commandment of Yah. It was for the priests in the temple. Okay? Now, they carried it over to every temple. I mean, every table, every household, every Jewish meal. When Yeshua decides in Mark 7 that we're not washing our hands according to this tradition, we're just going to use our dusty, dirty hands that we just walked through, whatever, and they're just not that clean. We're just going to start eating with our hands. You got to think again, they didn't use fork and spoons. They were just breaking bread with their hands and eating. The whole fight from that point on is about, why didn't you wash your hands according to tradition? Now you're unclean according to hand washing tradition. Notice not once is it talk about, why are you eating bacon or why are you eating pork? It's not about the food itself, but even then I'll take it one step further. Brother Dustin, tell him what you showed me in Matthew. This is even more evidence that this isn't about unclean meats. Because what are they eating according to Matthew?
In Matthew and Mark, it says 7, or it says 7. I was thinking Mark 7. It says bread.
Bread.
So in Mark chapter 7, verse 2, it says they observed that some of his disciples were eating their bread with unclean, that is, unwashed hands. But the Pharisees, in fact, all the Jews will not eat unless they wash their hands ritually, keeping to the tradition of the elders.
Okay.
When they come from the marketplace, they do not eat unless they have washed. And there are many other customs they have received and keep, like the washing of cups, jugs, copper utensils, and dining couches. Then the Pharisees and the scribes asked him, why don't your disciples live according to the tradition of the elders instead of eating bread with ritually unclean hands?
Again, notice there's nothing about eating pork or eating shrimp. There's nothing in there. It's about you ate bread without hand washing in a ritual way. So would it make any sense, again, put your feet in the shoes of the disciples. You're breaking bread without washing hands. Pharisees are like, hey, you're supposed to do that ritual Jewish hand washing thing. Now you're unclean according to our tradition, which again, they've declared it. It's not according to the law of Yah. And now Yeshua responds, okay? And he responds by saying in Mark 7, yeah, sure, we eat with unclean hands, and when we go and the food, say, has a little dirt on it or some bacteria, the body cleanses it so that you don't get sick or die, and then it kicks it out the other end. You poop it out. So the body will take care of it. If you do eat with unclean hands, you'll be fine. You're not unclean and unpure, you'll be fine. That's all they're arguing about, is this tradition of hand washing. Now, hear me out. Modern Bible translators that are Christian who presuppose that the law can change decided to put in parentheses at the end of, what verse is that again?
19.
Verse 19. They decided to put in parentheses, thus Yeshua, tongue twister. Thus Yeshua declared all foods clean. Now, do you see how even they don't make any sense? Because if this has nothing to do with what you're eating, but simply the hand washing, then why would he come out of left field and say all foods are clean? It doesn't make any sense, does it?
No.
Now you might ask, okay, but well, hold on now. So what is it talking about? Well, in the KJV, the King James, the very parentheses you see, thus he declared all foods clean, right here at the, I'm going to add it to stage here. The very end there of verse 19, thus he declared all foods clean, is not in the KJV. It's not in there. Now you go to the Greek, and it does talk about some sort of cleansing. It does have the mention of cleansing at the end of verse 19. When we did a little research, we found out it's talking about the body taking care of whatever you just ingested due to not washing your hands, and the body cleanses it so that you're not impure ritually, or you're not sick or anything like that. I'm trying to find the actual verse. It says in the Greek, literally in the Greek, says this: because it does not enter his heart but his stomach, and goes out into the latrine, cleansing all the foods. What's cleansing all the foods? The stomach. And then it comes out the other end. He's trying to tell them, don't sweat it. If you eat with unwashed hands, your body, your stomach will take care of it. It'll come out the other end, and everything will be cleansed. You're not going to die. Again, nothing to do with what meat are you eating, because they're not even eating meat, they're eating bread. Do you understand like how bad of a translation the Christians have made this entire argument? They're eating bread to begin with. It's to me, when a Christian comes to you in Mark 7, you've got to know the very first 3 verses will literally help you tremendously. It's got nothing to do with Yahweh, the Yeshua breaking Yahweh's law. Let's see. Did you have any more points on that? Because I'm trying to make sure I didn't miss anything.
Oh yeah, I got a big one.
Go for it.
So his argument is that essentially Yeshua is doing away with the commands of God. But if you track along with that understanding, then he's making Yeshua a hypocrite, because when you go to verse 8, it says, this is Mark chapter 7, starting at 8, it says, disregarding the command of God, so the law of God, the Torah of God, you keep the tradition of men. He also said to them, you completely invalidate God's command in order to maintain your tradition. And he goes on to say, Moses said, honor your mother and your father, and whoever speaks evil of father or mother must be put to death, right? It says, but you say, if a man tells his father or mother, whatever benefit you might have received from me is korban, that is to say, it is committed to the temple, you no longer let him do anything for his father or mother. You revoke God's word by your tradition that you have handed down, and you do many other similar things. So his immediate rebuke to them is not, oh, no, I did away with this law. We can eat anything clean. His immediate,
he's saying the opposite.
He's holding to the commands of God to rebuke them. He's rebuking them by the law and saying that you guys are forsaking God's commands by your traditions. You need to follow the commands rather than your traditions. And then he goes on, and this is where you get into verse 19. And yeah, he's literally saying, like you said, you eat the food, and okay, you might have a little grease on your hand when you're eating your sandwich after you've been working on your car all day. I only say that because I've done it before.
Yeah.
You might have a little grease on your hand.
Yeah.
But it's okay when it goes into your stomach. It's going to be purged, and it's literally going to come out into the toilet. You're going to be okay. Because that's what he said. That's what the passage literally says, that it goes into your stomach and is purged into the toilet, into the draught. You
That's
know?
it. That's all the argument is saying, don't sweat the traditions, just keep the commandments of Yah. If you want to keep traditions, make sure it doesn't override the commandments, which is what he's correcting them on, is saying, you've gotten so hyper fixated on how you interpreted this priestly temple commandment and tried to apply it to every Jew now. And I just described earlier how specific this hand washing is. It's not like us going to our local sink in the bathroom, using some Dove, boom, rinse and out. That's not what they literally went through an entire process of certain vessel, certain kind of water, has to be the right hand, then the left hand. Hands have to be pointed upwards when you're done so that the supposed uncleanliness doesn't run back down from gravity. So you're like this, you got to say the prayer.
That's
Okay.
That's what Netilat Yadayim means, by the way. It's the raising of the hands.
Okay, there you go. And again, if I want to start doing that tradition, cool. I just know that it's tradition, and that if I skip it one day and don't do it, I'm not breaking any commandments. I'm fine. Okay? Now, ironically, while Dustin was talking about how Yeshua said, by keeping your traditions, you break the commandments of Yah. What do Sunday Christians do? Sunday church is a tradition. Seventh-day Sabbath is a commandment.
Yeah.
By trying to enforce Sunday church and in that church saying you no longer need to keep the seventh-day Sabbath, they're doing exactly what Yeshua was correcting the Pharisees in this chapter about.
Facts.
By keeping your Sunday church and your Easter bunny and your ham dinners and all your traditions of ham dinner, Easter, whatever, you're breaking the commandments of Yah. To eat clean, to keep the biblical feasts, and to keep the biblical Sabbath. Return to his Torah is what he's saying. Keep Torah. Don't sweat the traditions. If you want to do traditions, fine, but don't let it cause you to wander from Torah. That's when tradition's an issue. It's simple. And I don't understand why Andrew Schumacher thinks this is like a gotcha moment when he pulls up Mark 7 and says, see, all things are clean. Right there, it says it. And then he goes on in this video saying, it's still in the text. It's not removed. It's not missing. It's there. But you got to remember, the Hebrew doesn't have a parentheses. It's literally a continual sentence. And the wording is totally butchered here when it starts a new sentence, puts it in parentheses, makes it seem like he's making a completely new statement. He's not. Look at the original Greek. He's talking about how when the food enters the stomach, it comes out the other end and it cleanses it, and you won't be unclean. He's not saying, oh, hey, by the way, pork is now clean. Like, that's not what he's saying. So I don't want to beat a dead horse here, guys, but you get my point.